A very good evening to you. You're watching Primetime News on Newsfirst. Joining you after some time from the Primetime News studio, I'm Chaturanga Hapwarati. Before we start to look at the stories that we have lined up for you this evening, let's first take a look at the headlines.
Anunayaka of the Malwatu chapter requests the people to unite and protect the country against foreign invasions. A proposal from Vasudeva to abolish the civil rights of leaders who sign agreements that are detrimental to the country. JVP trade unions speak out against the East Container Terminal being handed over to other countries. A warning to the government by Minister Rajitha. More than 400,000 people affected as a result of the drought. Ravana 1, Sri Lanka's very first satellite, successfully enters orbit.
On to those stories in detail now. The most venerable Dimbul Kumbure Vimala Dhammathera, the Anunayaka of the Askiri chapter of the Siam sect, stated in Kurunagala earlier today that everyone must come together to protect the nation from external forces.
It is great when we come together as Sri Lankans, setting aside differences to work as one. When that does not happen, our country falls prey to the whims of foreign powers. It happened during the time of the Portuguese, the Dutch and the British. Now there are other powers looking to take advantage of our country. I would like to remind everyone to never let anyone come here and establish their power over our island. Now we have various suspicions. Recent events, which were instigated by ISIS, were supposedly religious events. I see this as a failure in administration. When an incident occurs, that incident must be controlled so as to ensure that it does not blow out of proportion. It should be dealt with. We must not use this as a means of creating more problems. That is not good. I see that they are cradling this issue. That is not ideal. And that is how these kinds of issues get worse. There has to be one equal law in the country for 20 million people. There can't be different laws for different sets of people. In that case, how many laws do places like India need to have? One law for the powerful, a separate law for the average people, another for politicians. There has to be one law for all in this country, and that law must be applied as such as well.
Thursday, explosions crippled two oil tankers in the Gulf of Oman, raising alarms about immediate security and potential military conflict in a vital passageway for a third of the world's petroleum. The oil tankers belong to Norway and Japan. The owner of the Japanese company that the ship belonged to responded to the claims by US about the Iranian involvement.
By Thursday afternoon, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said that American intelligence agencies had concluded Tehran was behind the disabling of both ships.
It is the assessment of the United States government that the Islamic Republic of Iran is responsible for the attacks that occurred in the Gulf of Oman today. This assessment is based on intelligence, the weapons used, the level of expertise needed to execute the operation, recent similar Iranian attacks on shipping, and the fact that no proxy group operating in the area has the resources and proficiency to act with such a high degree of sophistication.
U.S. Central Command said in a statement that the Japanese oil tanker Kokuka Courageous had an unexploded limpet mine on their hull following an initial explosion. The Japanese owner of one of the attacked oil tankers said the vessel was struck by a projectile and not by a mine. President Donald Trump on Friday said if Iran were to block the Strait of Hormuz, it is not going to be closed for long, but did not elaborate on what potential steps the U.S. would take in response. They are going to be closing the strait, Trump reiterated during an interview. Earlier this year, Iran threatened to close the strait in response to a U.S. decision to end waivers on reimposed sanctions for companies that export oil from Iran. The Strait of Hormuz is the world's most important oil choke point. It is a gateway for almost a third of all seaborne crude oil. America's top diplomat, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, blamed Iran for Thursday's attacks without citing specific evidence as to why Tehran was responsible. However, US authorities later produced a video clip that allegedly showed Iran's involvement in the attack. US online media outlets are also blaming the US government and Secretary of State for allegedly falsifying evidence in this manner.
The owner of that tanker Japanese business owner by the name of Yukaka Katada, came out and said, not in as harsh of words as I'm about to use, but this is the gist of what he said: the U.S. is lying about this. First of all, the video they showed was actually in reverse. They weren't putting the mine on the ship. Those were the rescuers removing it so that it didn't explode and cause further damage. Second of all, the area where Mike Pompeo said the ship was struck, it was actually the opposite side, and it came from the air, not from the sea. So basically, Mr. Katada comes out and says, hey, everything Mike Pompeo and the United States is saying right now that Iran allegedly did to my ship, it's not true. They're lying. And what's great about this, though, everybody knew Pompeo was lying about this prior to Mr. Katada coming out and telling us this. I mean, Iran is the one that sent their military out there to rescue these sailors. And believe the fact that these war-hungry psychopaths in the Trump administration, Pompeo, Bolton, and the rest of them, that they're trying to once again phony up information so they can start another unwinnable and endless Middle Eastern war with Iran.
The United States has a long history of intervening in the internal affairs of foreign countries. The US intervened in the Israel-Palestinian conflict and to date continues to support Israel with billions of dollars in aid and reliable diplomatic backing. Since the appointment of President Trump, the issue has only escalated. After September 11, 2001 attacks under President George W. Bush, the US and NATO intervened to depose the Taliban government in the Afghan war. Afghanistan remains under military occupation while the Iraq war officially ended on 15th December 2011. In 2003, the US and a multinational coalition invaded Iraq to depose Saddam. Before and during the Iraq war, Ronald Rumsfeld, the Secretary of Defense at the time, claimed that Iraq had an active weapons of mass destruction program. No stockpiles were ever found. Colin Powell, the Secretary of State at the time, in a press statement on the 24th of February 2001 said that sanctions against Iraq had prevented the development of any weapons of mass destruction by Saddam Hussein. Powell came under fire for his role in building the case for the 2003 invasion of Iraq. Former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair in 2015 had apologized for the war in Iraq. The US intervened in the 2011 Libyan civil war by providing air power. In August 2014, the US began airstrikes against ISIS in Iraq in response to gains by the terrorist group that threatened American assets and Iraqi government forces. In March 2015, President Obama declared that he had authorized US forces to provide logistical and intelligence support to the Saudis in their military intervention in Yemen. It is quite evident that many of these countries are still reeling from the negative effects of these interventions. In an eyebrow-raising interview, US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo told Fox Business that American military intervention in Venezuela remains possible, a move that could violate international treaties and plunge the US into another protracted conflict like Iraq or Afghanistan. When observing international examples such as this, it is clear that any country that would not place itself in line with US interests would see sanctions being imposed and, in worst case scenarios, military intervention. Is this the fate that would befall our motherland as well? Religious leaders, including the Mahanayaka Theras, have spoken against US intervention in Sri Lanka that brings with it a mixture of military affairs and economic blackmail. Shouldn't global powers be ashamed to exert pressure on democracies which are more than capable of resolving their own issues?
These were the views expressed in the political arena today with regard to the visit of the US State Secretary and US intervention.
I strongly believe that a constitutional amendment with the two-third majority should be brought forward that would automatically nullify any agreement signed by a future government or politician that undermines the sovereignty of this nation and wasn't passed in parliament prior to it being signed. This is what the left frontists should do, not abolish presidency. A constitutional amendment that would abolish the civil rights of all the leaders involved in such agreements for life also should be brought forward. There are two people. One being the defense advisor to President Trump, John Bolton. Then there is the Secretary of State, Pompeo. It is a well-known fact that both of them want a war. Whether President Trump wants a war or not is a different story. But the international critics are certain that both of them want a war. Therefore, it is very clear that they are coming here looking for hunting grounds. The United States needs to take over Sri Lanka in order to control the Indian Ocean territory. They are trying to trap us by making us sign agreement over agreement. They are attempting to make a suitable environment in our country for their armies to come and establish themselves. They have finalized another agreement that is beyond any other agreement that Sri Lanka has signed. They are very secretive about it. This is the Millennium Challenge Corporation. This agreement can be nullified by the United States under 20 clauses at any time. Even if a small trade union strike occurs in the country, they can nullify this agreement and thereby ending all foreign aid that our country receives. The proposed Counter-Terrorism Act has been put forward to facilitate this agreement. The State Secretary is coming here to advance this agreement to the next level. The State Secretary, on one hand, is as powerful as the President. He is a very powerful person. We know that he is not coming here out of any love for us. We know that. He is coming to make a statement. He is coming here to show his right to this land. Nothing good will come out of this visit.
Defense Secretary retired General Shanta Kottekoda expressed these views on American defense agreements on Sirasa TV's Patikada program this morning.
We as Sri Lankans are proud of our army. We do not need foreign forces. Not even developed nations have the experience our three armed forces, special forces and defense units have. They may have advanced weaponry, but I don't think we need those forces. We have confidence. As a former army commander, I have faith that we can take care of our own security. My opinion is that when we sign such agreements, we need to be extremely careful. Meanwhile, JVP trade unions today warned that if the east terminal of the Colombo port is handed over to a third party, the Sri Lanka Ports Authority will be left with nothing.
The government headed by Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe has entered into a memorandum of cooperation to establish a company with governments of India and Japan and Sri Lanka Ports Authority as its shareholders to carry on operations and development activities at the port. We are isolated in the struggle that takes place inside the port. This must be said on a public platform. No other trade union has come forward or intervened to prevent the sale of the Eastern Terminal. Therefore, the situation is quite serious. We have decided to overlook the trade unions and address the employees of the port and request them to join our effort. This port is the heart of Sri Lanka. If we lose the port, Sri Lanka Ports Authority will no longer claim ownership of a Colombo port. Container operations is the main function at the port. Currently, the Ports Authority is not involved in any container operations at the Colombo port. If this is handed over to third parties, there will be no port for the Ports Authority. It is very clear. But we now have answers. Some parties continuously claim that they will take over the Trincomalee port and develop it. They said the same thing regarding the Hambantota port and now the Colombo port. We are prepared to fight against this through a centralized effort. We request to consider this an effort of the JVP to prevent the eastern terminal of the Colombo port being taken over by third parties.
Meanwhile, in other local news, the Attorney General's Department informed the Supreme Court today that it has no jurisdiction to consider the petition filed by Gotabaya Rajapaksa's challenging the dismissal of his preliminary objection at the Special High Court trial at Bar. This is announced when the petition by Rajapaksa against the dismissal of objections at the Permanent High Court trial at Bar was taken up before the Supreme Court today. Senior Additional Solicitor General Priyantha Nawana said that a petition against the order of the Permanent High Court trial at Bar can only be challenged when a final ruling is delivered. He further added that this order given to Rajapaksa was not the final ruling. The case being heard against Gotabaya Rajapaksa is with regard to the alleged misappropriation of approximately 33.9 million rupees for the construction of the D.A. Rajapaksa Memorial and Museum. Discussions that were to be held between the Sri Lanka Freedom Party and the SLPP today have been postponed.
General Secretary of the SLFP, Dayasiri Jayasekara, and Chairman of SLPP, Professor G.L. Peiris, had spearheaded the discussions.
Was it decided earlier not to hold the discussions?
Yes, it was decided a few days ago.
Why are the discussions stuck and unable to move on to the next stage?
It is not stuck. We had to take a few decisions as a party. They had to come to a conclusion about a steady program.
Isn't it because of the presidential or the prime ministerial candidate issue that these discussions have been halted?
No, there is no issue like that.
Wasn't that topic discussed at all?
It's been spoken of, but it wasn't discussed between the two parties.
Is there an agreement on a date of the next round of discussions?
Yes, next Wednesday.
There are nearly 4,000 representatives of our party elected through public vote in local government institutions. We need to get their opinion as well. We cannot take decisions alone. Also, there are 13 parties in the joint opposition. We have to hold an in-depth discussion with the leaders of all 13 parties. Both the parties unanimously decided to have the next round of discussions on the 26th.
සාකච්ඡා කළ යුතුයි. දෙපාර්ශ්වයම තීරණය කළා ඊළඟ සාකච්ඡා වටේ අපි පවත්වනවා කියලා 26
MPSP Dissanayaka continues to be positive about these discussions between the SLFP and the SLPP.
බාධා ගොඩක් තියෙනවා. මොන ප්‍රශ්න තිබ්බත් මම කියන්න කැමතියි. අපි
There are many obstacles in our way. No matter what problems we face, I would like to say, as SLFPers, we will come forward with an anti-UNP, anti-imperialist, anti-American, patriotic alliance. We hope that this broad alliance will include both Mahinda Rajapaksa and Maithripala Sirisena. People like Gotabaya Rajapaksa has become the dream of some of the parties that are joining this broad alliance. I urge members of both sides, do not do anything that would stop us moving forward, even if the discussions are successful or not, if an alliance is formed or not. The SLFPers in the country, the people representing the left of the country, will only support the candidate put forward by this broad patriotic alliance and not anyone else.
ගෝඨාභය රාජපක්ෂ මැතිතුමා තුනා නිල වශයෙන් ඇමරිකානු
Gotabaya Rajapaksa has officially relinquished his US citizenship, but the US authorities have to accept this. A letter must be submitted for this to be accepted. That is where these proceedings have stopped. If there is an issue like that, we had to look for a leader. We must find a leader who President Maithripala Sirisena can stand with. Chamal Rajapaksa is a good alternative for this.
හොයන්න එපා. ඉතින් ඒකට හොඳ විකල්පයක් තමයි චමල් රාජපක්ෂ මැතිතුමා.
මීළඟට අපේ ජනාධිපති අපේක්ෂකයා කවුද?
Who is our next presidential candidate? There is still no sign. Nominations have been handed in within a few months. The joint opposition should have taken a decision by now. I do not understand why the joint opposition is silent like this. We tried a lot to push the party to make this decision as soon as possible, but none of that was successful. To me, the joint opposition looks like they are not going to face the upcoming election. We propose the name of Chamal Rajapaksa for the party.
විපක්ෂයේ චර්යාව පෙන්වන්නේ. අපේ පක්ෂ වෙනුවෙන් යෝජනා කරේ චමල් රාජපක්ෂ මැතිතුමාගේ නම. නෑ.
No, even the discussions have not begun as yet. I am also questioning my leaders as to why this decision is being postponed. I have the same curiosity that you have.
ඔබට තියෙන කුතුහලයම මටත් තියෙනවා.
Meanwhile, many opinions are being shared on the proposed presidential candidate of the United National Party. Speaker Karu Jayasuriya expressed these views on the matter in an interview with the BBC Sinhala service.
My name has been mentioned many times and many have invited me too. These days people speak of it more than I expected. I have not asked for it. I said one thing, that is, if I am recommended by the United National Party and if I receive the blessings of the leadership, I will consider. If he failed to fulfill his duties as the Speaker in a justifiable manner, how do you expect him to fulfill the duties of a President? He must first set an example as the Speaker. There were many who fulfilled their duties. However, he failed in this regard. He was a speaker who clearly supported the UNP. Therefore, I believe that he will not be accepted by the general public as a presidential candidate. We will not accept him as well. Under the guise of democracy, he protected Ranil Wickremesinghe. We do not believe that Speaker Karu Jayasuriya upholds democracy. On the 26th of October, when MP Vijitha Herath brought forward a no-confidence motion against the government written in a piece of paper, it was Karuja Surya who accepted this, included it in the parliamentary agenda and initiated a parliamentary debate within a short period of time. Just because someone is attired in white does not mean that his intentions are pure. Karuja Surya represents the UNP and Ranil Wickremesinghe. There is no doubt about it. We are against Karuja Surya. They are trying to fool the Sinhala Buddhists in the country. We will stand against such individuals. It is now clear why the special committee was established. It was brought forward to protect Ranil and highlight the president as the wrongdoer. Who proposed the establishment of such a committee? It was the Flower Bud Party and the UNP. Even though the Flower Bud Party is now trying to escape the matter, it was them who brought forward the proposal. Members of the opposition were appointed to this committee and they later resigned. The main wrongdoers are Karuja Surya, Ranil Wickremesinghe and Mahinda Rajapaksa. Early 2007, Karuja Surya resigns from the UNP and crosses over to Mahinda Rajapaksa's government with 18 other senior members. Sworn in as the Minister of Public Administration and Internal Affairs. 9th of December 2008. Resigns from the Mahinda Rajapaksa government by himself and rejoins the UNP, appointed as deputy leader. For your attention.
Staying on the subject, Speaker Karuja Surya and opposition leader Mahinda Rajapaksa participated in a public dialogue in Kurunegala today.
A special committee of Parliament is currently in place to study and report to Parliament its recommendations to ensure communal and religious harmony in Sri Lanka. The committee was appointed following the tense situation that arose in Digana. The committee, chaired by Speaker Karuja Surya, comprises of members including the Prime Minister and the opposition leader. An awareness program was organised by this committee in Kurunegala today.
We were able to establish a special parliamentary committee vested with complete powers. This committee inquired into the people's ideas, considered the advice of religious leaders, formed 24 proposals and presented them into Parliament. All 24 proposals were unanimously accepted in Parliament. Subsequently, as the second phase of the committee convened once again and took steps to further strengthen this initiative. A special thanks goes out to our former president and current opposition leader. On the 3rd of this month, the Prime Minister and the opposition leader discussed sections number 10 and 34 in depth, and the opposition and the ruling party agreed to implement these measures. The opposition will agree to matters that will bring benefit to the country. At present, we agree to play an active role in this committee for the future of this country. The government and the opposition have agreed to implement approximately 24 to 25 proposals.
Ceylon local news, Minister Dr. Rajitha Senaratne expressed these views during an event held in Colombo today to mark the national event of World No Tobacco Day.
The latest challenge we are facing at present is Chinese cigarettes. It appears that local production of cigarettes is insufficient and they are trying to import cigarettes from China to cater to the Chinese nationals working in the country. There are 6,000 Chinese laborers at present. If we are to import cigarettes for the Chinese, we will then have to import Indian cigarettes to the 10,000 Indians in Sri Lanka. Russians living in Sri Lanka will also request for cigarettes manufactured in Russia. The World Health Organization will then take back all titles awarded to us. Therefore, I stress, as long as I am the Health Minister, I will not allow legal importation of cigarettes from any country. Ministers in charge of customs are responsible to ensure cigarettes will not be imported illegally. He says that if cigarettes are imported from China, he will not remain in the government even for a second. On one hand, he is correct. It's now time for him to leave.
Over 440,000 people continue to suffer as a result of a drought in the island. Residents in the northern and eastern provinces are bearing the brunt in terms of the Central Expressway Section 1 from Kadawatha to Meerigama.
In June 2018, approval of the Cabinet of Ministers was granted to enter into a loan agreement between the Government of Sri Lanka and the Exim Bank of China to obtain a loan of $989,448,556 or just under $1 billion. The agreement between the Government of Sri Lanka and the Exim Bank was signed on the 22nd of May 2019. A cabinet paper was presented and it was agreed to raise $1 billion, of which the Sri Lanka government will raise 15%. It is clear that the government now does not have the capacity to pay the money in dollars thanks to the current mismanaged state of the economy. Instead, the government will now raise the money in rupees and pay the money to the contractor in rupees as well. The cabinet paper states that the contractor has agreed to the payment in rupees. The funds will thus be made available through loans that have been taken from state banks amounting to 30.4 billion rupees. The current state of the state banks with huge non-performing loans, including from other state-owned enterprises, leaves analysts to ponder whether these will also eventually be classified as non-performing loans. It is indeed an interesting development that the contractor, a foreign party, will accept payments in rupees. Further, this particular section is, according to insiders in the industry, said to cost the taxpayers 30% more than the cost quoted by local contractors who are working on Section 2 of the project. More on this tomorrow.
Ravana 1, a satellite designed and developed by two Sri Lankan engineers, was released into orbit from the International Space Station today at 3:45 p.m. local time.
The Arthur C. Clarke Foundation has made arrangements to witness this event live from its premises. Ravana 1, which is a cube-sized miniature satellite built by Tharindu Dayaratna, an electrical and electronics engineer of the University of Peradeniya and a research engineer at the Arthur C. Clarke Institute for Modern Technologies, together with Dulani Chamika, a mechatronics engineer from the same institute. The satellite, which was designed and built at the Kyushu Institute of Technology in Japan, is 1,000 cubic centimeters in size and weighs 1.1 kilograms.
Deputy Leader of the United National Party, Minister Sajith Premadasa, expressed the following views in Tangol, Hambantota today.
දේශපාලන ශාස්ත්‍රයේ බලවතුන් බොහෝ දෙනා දේශපාලන බලු පොරේ පටන් ගන්නවා.
Many powerful politicians have commenced their power struggle. They are all in search of auspicious time frames to take control of the throne. They have all forsaken the people. Their hunger for power is so intense that they have now initiated an unusual game. Instead of sharing unadulterated information, they are creating news. What will be the future of this country? We will allow leaders to fool the people and steal from the funds of the general public? We are certain that the public will support politicians who put the people first and work selflessly to serve the people.
Minister Sajith Premadasa laid the foundation stones for the construction of 5 model villages in Tangol, Hambantota under the Samata 7 housing project. The 5 model villages will comprise of 134 housing units. Minister Sajith Premadasa also presented financial aid for the Mihindu Perahara of the Beliyatta Rajamaha Temple in line with the event.
Scientists at the Royal Botanic Gardens, Kew and Stockholm University found that 571 plant species had disappeared in the last 2.5 centuries, a number that is more than twice the number of birds, mammals and amphibians recorded as extinct. This data suggests plant extinction is happening as much as 500 times faster than what would be expected normally if humans weren't around. Another reason for the vanishing of certain plant species is due to industrialization. Many farmers switched to growing a single crop that was easy to process and distribute. Hence, by 1970, almost 90% of all wheat varieties had disappeared from China. In addition, 80% of the maize varieties grown in Mexico, and by the summer of 1971, more than 85% of the corn varieties grown in America were gone. Mass-scale production of the same type of plant makes the plants more susceptible to diseases at a mass scale. This in turn leads to millions of dollars of losses, and farmers face many difficulties as their entire harvest is destroyed by a single disease. Our changing climate also demands a variety of plants that can adapt to different climate conditions so that when some fail, others will prevail. This was seen in Sri Lanka as well during the Sena caterpillar menace. Many Sri Lankan farmers were devastated when their entire harvest was destroyed. As the need for a self-sustaining, resilient agriculture sector grows, does Sri Lanka have a plan?
Birds are one of Mother Nature's most exquisite creations. Despite their beauty, the farmers in Mullaitivu, Mulliyawale are not awestruck by them. This is because they have to struggle to save their crops from these very same birds. We leave you tonight with this footage. Good night.